get this forward to. I can probably put it on live now. Cool. Okay, good morning, everybody. So it's about 6:45 a.m., and I'll be honest, this is definitely the earliest I've ever been live. So this is episode 2 of Coffee with Riley, and I'm your host, Riley. I was out on my way to. I'm up early because I want to go to the gym today, but I figured that I'll come on and record an episode before I go. It's funny. I just noticed I have like a weird like talk radio voice that I'm trying to add to it. I don't know why. That's some weird subconscious thing. So this morning, I'm sitting here trying to think like what to talk about. One of the things about making content is like if you don't like it's hard if you don't know what you're going to talk about, right? But a lot of the times people will be like, "Oh, don't worry, man, just go on, like do your thing." But it's harder when you're by yourself, right? So, one of the things I've been thinking about lately is this idea of success, right? And like what it actually means. It's funny. I remember like when I was younger, I literally thought of success as, how like I'm not sure like all those Disney movies as a kid. Whenever someone would go on like an adventure or like some type of search where they'd have to go through a cave and like hold a fucking and they'd find a big pile of gold, right? like gold coins and shit. I used to think like success was like sitting at the top of that, and that's life. Like I don't know. But as I get older, and I would argue I'm becoming more successful. It's kind of strange because my definition has been forced to change. And like some could argue, like, oh, you're changing your definition because you aren't sitting on a pile of gold. And that's true. Like you could say that, but I think that it's as you get older, things just naturally change, and I think that's one of the things that happened is the perspective that I have now. Um, being kind of close to what I would think of previously as success, seeing other people at that level, and realizing that maybe it's it's not all that it's cracked up to be. And even if it is, those like one of the things that I always used to think is like, hey, maybe I can maybe if I was president, I could probably be a better president because I'd make better choices than these people. The same thing with success, right? So maybe if you were in their position, you'd probably live a little better. Like you could think that, you could argue that, but anyways, that's not really the point. My main thing that I wanted to say is when you get older, you realize that like as long as you kind of drop your expectations, you can pretty much find success in anything. And that's the thing is, success is one of those like preordained destinations that a lot of people have in their head. But the thing is like it's hard for you to know about some place before you've ever been there. You know what I mean? And the problem that a lot of us do have when we're visualizing these things is we're doing it from the original perspective of not quote unquote not being successful. And that's just, it's not true. Like it's not a true place to be looking from. And so, it's goes along with all the other ways that we look at shit. Like we're doing it from the wrong perspective. So we're getting the wrong ideas of things. And, you know, once I like it, it's not even like I made a conscious choice. Just stop expecting shit. No, like I had to, because like I was getting every single day, like I was getting my heart broken, literally, like not even by girls. Um, and it was because I had a lot of expectations. Like I was trying to force shit. Um, so there's a book called the Tao Te Ching. I don't know if it's a book. I mean, it is a book, but it was written like by a guy named Lao Tzu, and I think the 1600s or the 1400s. But I think most of it's like I think that story is kind of like a myth. It seems it's like a mythical work, kind of like the Bible, like a Chinese Bible. Um, but they talk about fuck. God damn it! I lost what I was saying. Damn it! I lost it. Um, so dropping your not forcing shit. Yeah. Um, the Tao says to like the harder you try to force things, the worse they come out to be. So it says uh, force a project to completion and something I forgot the end of it, but it's like it will break or something like that. It's like if no matter like everything takes time, literally. Um, so getting a little metaphysical here, we think in a different dimension than we operate, right? So we think in the fourth dimension, but we operate in the third, right? Um, I think that's right. No, maybe we think in the fifth and we operate in the fourth. The thing is that when we think, we're outside of time, and so we can project ourselves into the future. We can look back at the past, and we can see currently where we are. Doing all those things is we can't do that here in our physical reality, but we can do that in our heads, right? So the problem that we run into with most of these things is that we're not aware of like whatever distance we project in the future. We're not aware of how much time that actually is in reality, right? So you could be like, oh, well, if I just think 1 year ahead, that's 1 year. Not really. Um, because 1 year isn't actually like 1 year. It's a long fucking time in physical reality. If you were to sit and like, it's kind of hard to explain, but if you think of um, like look back on your past and think of how fast a year seems to have went by, it's like oh, where'd the time go? But when you're actually living it, it seems like eternity, right? That's the dichotomy of our current reality, is that we sit on that Occam's razor of not being in time and being in time. The thing is when we're like thinking of these things that we want to do or trying to be successful, these expectations that we have, first of all, they're from an altered perspective, right? They're from a place of lack, so from a place of not having. But God damn, that's loud. But they're also, let's see if I can just mute this. Okay, but they're also from a place of like outside of time, right? And so when we're thinking of these things that we want to do, we're never thinking of the amount of actual like physical processing time that needs to go through in order to bring this shit into reality. And so a lot of times um the biggest letdown is how long something takes, right? I know for me, and every single thing I do, no matter what, I always under anticipate how long it's going to be. And no matter what, it doesn't matter. But the problem is when it comes to like working on projects with other people. You know what I mean? Uh, but not even that. Like when I'm expecting projects to be done, or things to be ready, I get really frustrated, like super frustrated. But what I fail to understand, what I fail to realize at that time that I'm getting frustrated is like how long things actually take. But it's not even that. It's how little we actually understand of the process. So one of the things that, like, when you're making something, right? Um Most things that come into creation like come from one singular thought, right? So one singular thought, one like form, one finite piece of energy, however long, however much you think there is in a thought, it's definitely way less than the thing that comes out of it. So let's say like you have like Henry Ford had the thought to make a car, right? Um, the car was a hell of a lot more complicated than the thought to make a car. And there was like a car weighs like 2,000 pounds. A thought weighs nothing. There's nothing to a thought, right? Um, so it takes nothing for you to think a thought. And even if you're thinking thoughts like about something, it takes nothing for you to think a thought. So it's super easy to just run through 1,000 different thoughts about something and have 1,000 different expectations of how something should be, right? But the reality is, um, like it takes a long time for a thought to actually make something in reality, right? So we're getting jumbled up with all of these different thoughts about how these different things should be. And this thing hasn't even been made yet. So in our head, we've already made it 1,000 different times, right? And we get ahead of ourselves. Like we think we're where we should be. Like we think it should be done because it's already done in our heads. But the thing is, and this is where like humility comes in, because uh, most of the time, it either requires like you only have a certain piece of the puzzle, and I would argue you have like less than 10%. So my main point on saying like how much a thought is, I believe that a thought is like maybe 1% of like an actual project. You know what I mean? So like the idea to do the project, that's only like 1% of the project, if that. You know, but or the idea for an invention. You know, people who talk about like, oh, I want to invent something, I want to make a business, but I don't have any ideas. Like the ideas are, it's like a nail. You know what I mean? It's like a nail in it's one nail in the house. Like it's a start. Um, but the thing is like we think we have the whole fucking like we think we have the whole manual in our head, and that's just not the reality. And the thing is, like, it actually takes time to not only make the thing, but to get the full picture of the thing in your head. And usually, by the time you get the full picture of the thing in your head, that thing is meeting you there in reality. Like, because you're typically building it, right? If you ask anybody who's inventing something or building something new, it's very rarely are they doing it from like, oh, this is what I planned out, this is how I did it. Like here's the fucking directions that I wrote out, and here's how I did it. Like I followed the directions, and that's how I built it, and I did it right on the first time. Nobody ever does that, ever, Matt, ever, right? But and I know I'm not the only one. We all expected to do it right the first time, but not only do it right at the first time, to do it fast and to do it way before anyone expects it. Um, I don't know why that is. I think it's very strange. There's a lot to this manifestation thing, right? And I think the biggest thing that most of us don't understand is this time thing, because a lot of us are young, right? And time seems to be getting like shorter as we kind of go through our lives, right? But that's the illusion. So it's an illusion, but it's actually an illusion of an illusion, because it is a real thing. Like in our reality, time is something that we have to deal with. But we think it's an illusion because we're in our heads, right? And our heads are out, like our brains, our thoughts are outside of time. So it becomes very strange. And a lot of this process is to not get caught up with any of the thoughts, right? But to actually either be or do, right? So be the person that you need to be to do the thing that you need to do, right? And a lot of the times, you don't find out who you need to be until you start doing what you need to do, right? And that doing will turn you into who you need to be so that whatever that thing is that you want, you'll have at the time you finish doing the thing that you need to do. And I mean, you can look at this in any situation, you know, like a financial transaction, you know what I mean? Like you got to do that thing until you can be wealthy, right? You got to work that job until you can get that paycheck. Um, every single thing in life is some type of transaction, at least an energetic one. And, you know, for me, I get like really frustrated because I forget these things, you know, and I forget how much work and effort it takes to do this shit. Um, but the thing is, and this is why I switched from working fucking manual labor jobs, pushing around stairs and fucking like I don't know. Oh, I'm so far removed from it. I don't even remember what I used to do. I used to push around staging and shit, drive it around. Like the I stopped doing that and now work on the internet. The biggest reason is because of the amount of leverage that the internet gives you. I mean, I would argue it gives you an unlimited point of leverage, but the problem is that like it still takes a lot of time because you don't just instantly get the leverage. You know, you got to go in there and build it, and that's the way it is for everything. You know, a lot of people think that they're going to be able to shortcut around it. You know, like I know a lot of people like, oh, they read business books so that they don't make the mistakes that those guys did, and so that they'll get there sooner. You might, but you're still going to make your own mistakes, and it's still going to take as long as it is supposed to take. And thinking that you're supposed to be someplace rather than where you are is a big problem. And that is going to lead to one, you being unhappy in the current moment, but two, you not ever getting to where you're technically actually supposed to go because you think you're supposed to be somewhere else. Um, you're you like really truly need to understand that like in every single thing you do, even when you think you're doing it wrong, even when you don't know what you're doing, you're being guided, right? Because that thing that's telling you to do something isn't going to lead you down the wrong road as long as you're not thinking, right? If you're thinking about what to do, you're going to have a problem. I know that kind of got super meta towards the end, but it's it's true, right? Eventually I'll get a little bit more eloquent and I'll be able to understand like not yeah, I'll be able to understand what I'm saying, but break it down and actually like have a little bit more follow up to what I'm talking about. But the thing is like you got to get this stuff out there first, you know? And for me, like I'm still teaching myself, but when like even just saying that it's kind of freaking me out because I'm teaching myself with shit that like I don't even know how I know this shit, right? So, um, listen, that's Coffee with Riley. This is episode 2. Thanks for listening. Oh, also, before we cut out, if you like this, then do me a favor, leave me a review, share it with your friends, and subscribe. But also go and follow me on these other platforms. So look me up on YouTube, youtube.com, Riley David, And I'm on Facebook, facebook.com, Riley David, and Instagram, Riley David for real, and Twitter, Riley David for real. So, yeah, thanks so much for listening, and share with a friend.